Hey, 7th graders, Mr. Allen, another one of our flip lessons today. Today we're going to be working on the triangular trade. Now we already cut this out and put this in our interactive notebook on page 32, but just to kind of go over where we were, all right, this is what it should look like in your notebook. I'm going to try to get that in here. Okay, so we've got an arrow going from the Americas to Europe. We've got an arrow going from, let me see if I can get, it's easier to do it this way, from Africa to the Americas, and then we've got one all the way over here going from Europe down to Africa. Then down here we've got our impact on Africa, America, and Europe. There is a slide for each. I think they go in order. If not, I'll try to help you along as we go. If you have any questions, as always, hit me up on Schoology. All right, here we go. Let's make me a little bit smaller. There we go. All right, so this is going to go in your arrow that is going from Americas to Europe. So this is that top arrow, all right up here. Okay, so the Americas, remember, we're working under a mercantilism policy. So the colonies are going to be there to benefit the mother country. So what does the mother country want from its colonies? It's going to want raw materials, or vocabulary word that we've been using, natural resources, right? Lumber, fur, sugar, cotton, tobacco, rice. All sorts of different types of things. As you can see from the map, they got a lot of different natural resources from different areas of colonies. From kind of the North America, they had North American colonies, a lot of whale oil, lumber, furs. If they had kind of some southern colonies, rice, silk, indigo, tobacco. Indigo is a dye used for the manufacturing of clothing. And then from the bottom, that's sugar, molasses, wood, things like that. What the mother country would then do with those is they would manufacture them into some sort of finished product, manufactured good, textiles, etc., and then send that back to the Americas and sell them for a profit. And they'd virtually get, they'd pay very, very minute amount of money to get the raw materials to make the goods. They would sell that back to North America. And so you can kind of see how there's kind of there's multiple different triangular trades going on, but they're all kind of going from one way to the other. Then there might be one kind of inside of the finished products and things like that. So Europe to Africa, same map. What is Africa getting out of this deal? All right, they're going to get some manufactured goods, some textiles. What they really, really, really want are guns, cloth, iron, rum, those kind of items from Europe, and particularly from England and colonies and countries like that. What this is going to allow the African, I don't want to say nations, mostly tribes to do at this point, is it's going to be used as a power source. Africans do not have guns, so those that do, those who are able to get them, those nations on the coast are able to conquer and take over many of the nations that live in the interior of the Africa, which is also rich in another natural resources that the mother countries are really looking forward to, rich in gold. Another product, ivory, spices, things like that, are coming out of Europe to Africa. But these are the goods that and that should not, let me see if I can change that. Let's go and show. It should not say runs. It should say rum. Like that. Alright, good to go. But those are the kinds of materials that the African countries want, or African nations, African tribes wanted from European mother countries. So Africa to America. One thing that we're going to spend probably a good solid day, maybe even the next couple days on, is this idea of the Middle Passage. All right, and that's going to be that time period from Africa that slaves are on to the Americas. Now, it can be as short as a month and a half. It can be up to a 3-month trip, depending on where those slaves are going. If those slaves are going to Brazil and the West Indies, going to be a little bit shorter than, say, if they're going all the way to Charleston, South Carolina. On average, this was about a 3-month trip. We talked earlier about, tens of millions of slaves making it to the colonies. You've also got to put into the fact that 20,000 or 20% of those African slaves didn't make it or died along the way. Some of it was self-inflicted, people kind of realizing what was in store for them coming in, but most of that was due to the conditions on these ships. And we'll talk a little bit more of that in the next coming days to discuss, what the conditions on these ships were like, because many slave catchers and slave traders and things like that were treating many of these Africans not as people but more as cargo. So that trip, what was Africa sending back to America? It was almost exclusively slaves. You would see some spices and things like that thrown in, but it was almost exclusively slaves. That slide shouldn't be in there. I don't know why it is. So we don't have that on there. Alright, so we'll skip that slide. Europe. What was the impact on Europe? Okay, so we're actually going to go all the way to the side here, so make sure you're there. Okay. Ooh, I skipped a couple. That's why. Alright, here we go. Africa. We're going to start at Africa, so we're going to go in order. The impact on the Africans, about 10 to 15 million are forced enslaved, and we said about another 20% didn't make it to the colony. So we're talking probably close to 20 million people. That's an estimate. We don't really have great numbers, but some people have said it's probably much higher than that. We're talking the neighborhood close to probably 20 million people impacted by the slave trade in Africa. It's going to start wars in Africa over the slave trade, slave raids to capture slaves in Africa. So as you can see kind of from the painting down below, majority of the slave catchers in Africa were Africans themselves. Those nations that lived close to the coast, who were getting the guns and things like that they needed to conquer the tribes inside the interior to bring them back out to become slaves in the colonies. America's, what are you going to see the impact in America? The growth of plantations. One of the biggest reasons why the colonies were turning to slaves is they needed a huge labor force, and slavery was going to provide that. You're going to see a strict social order developing. Very soon in many places throughout the Americas, slaves are going to outnumber people who are free. So you're going to have a very strict social order to kind of keep that intact. Kind of some of those rules we talked about with the abolitionist movement, not allowing slaves to learn how to read or write, only allowing slaves to travel certain days, things like that. Disease is also going to be introduced not only through the transport of Europeans, but also transport of people from Africa. And disease is going to be the #1 killer of Native Americans. There you can see a description of somebody who has come under the ills of smallpox. Impact on Europe. Europe's wealth is going to grow tremendously. The amount of gold throughout Europe is going to go up into the tens of thousands % during this time period. Spain, Portugal, England, the Netherlands, France, these kind of big, powerful colonial powers are going to be extremely rich on this. You're going to see changes in culture, all right, food, clothing, goods, kind of that stuff we talked about with Native Americans through cultural diffusion. You're going to see those goods that were from the Americas getting into European culture. Goods like tobacco, coffee was more readily available, chocolate, sugar, those types of stuff that are going to have a huge impact. And cultural diffusion is going to be where those cultures kind of intermix. So you get stuff like, like we talked about spaghetti and pizza and things like that. Those are issues of cultural diffusion because there's things from multiple cultures going there. You're going to see increases in technology, not only because of the age of exploration is an increase in technology that allowed European countries to do the exploration in the first place. And then what you're going to see a little bit later on is when we get through the colonies is you're going to see the start of wars over the colonies. These are profitable empires. So you're going to want to control, the more land you control, the more chance you have for profit. So France, Spain, England, the Netherlands are all going to have you know, sometimes small wars, sometimes major wars, to kind of see who's going to control this kind of new world, so to speak. All right, that's our flip lesson for tonight. If you have any questions, as always, hit me up on Schoology, and I will try to get to your questions as soon as possible. Thank you. See you guys.